For most of modern history, the Amazon has been framed as a place beyond civilization, a world too hostile, too chaotic, and too overgrown for complex societies to ever take root. When European explorers first pushed into the basin in the 1500s, they carried with them the assumptions of their time, that great civilizations required stone, metal, domesticated animals, and vast open plains. The rainforest, with its insects, humidity, and shifting rivers, seemed the very opposite of a cradle of complexity. And so the idea of an empty Amazon was born. It became a scientific myth, one repeated in textbooks, documentaries, and classrooms. An Edenic wilderness untouched by the hands of man. A place where small, scattered tribes lived in isolation, surviving but never thriving, moving lightly across the forest floor. But this myth wasn't created by evidence. It was created by misunderstanding. Early Spanish chroniclers like Francisco de Orellana described massive cities, markets, ceremonial centers, and fortified villages stretching for miles along the riverbanks. He wrote of roads, broad as avenues, populations numbering in the millions, and agricultural systems that seemed to defy the laws of nature. His accounts shook Europe. Yet when later expeditions tried to find these cities, they found nothing. No temples, no palaces, no roads. Only endless green, buzzing with life. The failure was taken as proof. Orellana must have lied. But he hadn't. He had simply witnessed something extraordinary, a civilization in its final century, ravaged by a force no city could survive: disease. Smallpox and measles spread faster through the rainforest than any army. Villages collapsed, fields overgrew, roads disappeared under roots and vines. In the span of a few generations, entire cultures were erased, not by conquest, but by biology. And in the absence of survivors, the jungle reclaimed everything. For centuries afterward, Western scholars assumed that what they saw was what had always been: dense forest, scattered tribes, silence. But they weren't seeing the Amazon as it was. They were seeing the Amazon after catastrophe, a forest masking the bones of a lost world. The first cracks in this narrative came from the soil. Throughout the basin, archaeologists began noticing patches of strange, dark earth, soil rich with nutrients, pottery fragments, charcoal, and biological signatures foreign to the natural forest. Locals called it terra preta, the black earth. It wasn't natural, it was engineered. Someone, thousands of years ago, had figured out how to modify the rainforest's famously poor soil, transforming it into a supercharged agricultural system, a soil that could last centuries, a soil still fertile today. This wasn't random. It wasn't the work of nomads. This was infrastructure. Then came the mounds, perfect circles and squares visible only from the sky. Earthworks aligned with celestial events, enclosures that stretched for miles across Acre, Bolivia, and western Brazil. Their geometry was unmistakably intentional, evidence of planning, engineering, mathematics. And yet, these structures were built not of stone, but of earth. Over time, the jungle swallowed them whole. Trees grew atop walls, vines wrapped through plazas. The forest became both tomb and guardian. Still, the biggest revelation came with LiDAR, a technology that uses lasers to scan through forest canopies, revealing what lies beneath. When researchers flew over the Amazon with LiDAR, the myth shattered instantly. The forest floor lit up with patterns: straight lines, grid-like streets, raised causeways, canals, reservoirs, moats, and platforms forming sprawling urban complexes. Cities, real cities, not a few, dozens, perhaps hundreds. One region in Ecuador revealed 6,000-year-old settlements connected by engineered roads. Another in Bolivia showed geometric complexes the size of Manhattan. Every scan delivered the same message: the Amazon was not empty. It was full, densely populated, intensely organized, and profoundly engineered. The jungle, it turned out, was not resisting human civilization. It was cooperating with it. Many parts of the Amazon today are not untouched wilderness, but ecological gardens, designed by human hands centuries ago, sustained by the forest itself. We now know the truth. The Amazon was shaped, cultivated, and engineered by millions of people over thousands of years. But if the region supported complex cities, vast road networks, agricultural innovation, and ceremonial architecture, then who built them? What did their world look like? And how far did their knowledge stretch before everything disappeared? To answer that, we must step deeper into the trees, into the heart of the lost civilization itself. If you want to understand how a civilization survives inside the world's densest rainforest, you have to start with the soil. Because the Amazon, despite its overwhelming size and beauty, is built on a fragile foundation. Most of its natural soil is thin, acidic, and poor in nutrients. In many places, it cannot sustain long-term farming. And yet, scattered like dark islands across the basin are patches of rich, black earth. Soil so fertile that modern farmers prize it. Soil that regenerates itself. Soil that should not exist in a tropical rainforest. This was the Amazon's first scientific miracle. Not a miracle of nature, a miracle of people. It's called Terra Preta, the Black Earth, and it's one of the most sophisticated ecological technologies ever developed in the ancient world. A technology created not by accident, but by intention. A technology powerful enough to sustain millions. The soil that shouldn't exist. At first glance, Terra Preta looks like nothing more than dark, crumbly dirt. But when examined carefully, its structure reveals a kind of genius. It's infused with charcoal, broken pottery, fish bones, plant matter, microbes that thrive in high-carbon environments. This wasn't dumped or scattered randomly. It was engineered. The charcoal, known as biochar, binds with organic material, creating a stable matrix that traps nutrients and prevents them from being washed away by rain. The pottery shards help aerate the soil. The bones add phosphorus and calcium. The microbial communities make the soil alive, able to regenerate even after centuries of use. In other words, this was not a garden. It was a machine. A biological engine designed to turn poor rainforest earth into an agricultural powerhouse. A soil system millions of people could live on. For decades, scholars believed the Amazon could never support large populations. The soil was too weak, the land too unforgiving. A few small villages, maybe, but never cities, never networks, never states. But Terra Preta changes the equation completely. Wherever Terra Preta appears, you also find fish weirs, canals, raised fields, house platforms, ceremonial plazas, roads, earthworks. Each Terra Preta site is not an isolated patch. It is a node in a much larger system. A system of landscape engineering so extensive that parts of the forest we see today are actually human-designed ecosystems. This wasn't survival. This was mastery. A civilization built on carbon. The people who created Terra Preta didn't simply farm. They designed an environment that partnered with them. Their agricultural strategy blended three principles: enhance the soil, shape the land, let the forest help you. Instead of clearing huge deforested fields like many ancient civilizations, they used a mosaic strategy, a patchwork of orchards, gardens, and engineered soils woven into the forest itself. It was sustainable, it was scalable, it was brilliant. And it allowed cities to grow, quietly, invisibly, beneath the canopy. The unlikely clue that changed everything. In the 1980s, archaeologists noticed something strange. Villages with terra preta had been reused for centuries. Ancient Amazonian societies did not constantly migrate in search of fresh soil. They stayed in place, generation after generation, because they made the land fertile. Moreover, terra preta has one more remarkable ability. It spreads. The soil recruits surrounding Earth, turning adjacent areas fertile over time. It grows like a living organism. This discovery stunned researchers. Whoever invented terra preta wasn't just farming. They were programming nature. The scale of the Black Earth civilization. Today, terra preta has been found across the Amazon basin, from Brazil and Bolivia to Peru and Colombia. Some patches stretch miles wide. Others cover entire ridges and plateaus. One area in central Amazonia is the size of a modern city. Carbon dating confirms something even more dramatic. Terra preta was created over millennia, not centuries. A sustained project, a cultural inheritance passed down through hundreds of generations. And because terra preta marks human settlement, its sheer volume suggests something staggering. The Amazon once supported population densities rivaling classical Europe. Not scattered tribes, not sparse villages, but complex urban networks, millions strong. The rediscovery of an invisible world. When LiDAR flights scanned terra preta regions, the results were explosive. Beneath the soil markers, the scans revealed roads straighter than Roman causeways, canal systems engineered for fish farming, moated towns in geometric patterns, plazas arranged with astronomical precision, interconnected settlements across hundreds of miles. This wasn't improvised. This was a blueprint, a system, a civilization that understood ecology, geometry, and time. And the soil was the key. Terra preta was the foundation of a rainforest megacity, a decentralized, interconnected urban world woven into the forest, not built against it. A civilization that survived by disappearing. But this technological triumph also explains why the civilization vanished without stone monuments or pyramids. They built with wood, with earth, with plants, with living systems. When disease arrived, their cities didn't crumble. The forest simply reclaimed them. Architecture became canopy. Roads became roots. Plazas became groves. And the soil, their greatest legacy, remained, whispering across centuries. Terra preta is not just a clue. It is evidence of intelligence, of system-wide planning, of a worldview that saw humans not as rulers of nature, but as partners within it. To understand the civilization that built it, we must now examine the patterns they left behind in the land itself, patterns revealed only by light. For centuries, the Amazon hid its past beneath a cloak of green. A forest so dense, so alive, so impenetrable that even modern explorers struggled to understand what lay beneath it. To the human eye, everything looked the same. A chaotic tapestry of trees, vines, and shadows, stretching infinitely in every direction. But light sees differently. LiDAR, light detection and ranging, is the closest thing modern science has to X-ray vision. From a plane flying high above the jungle, it sends hundreds of thousands of laser pulses per second through the canopy. Some of those beams bounce off leaves, others off branches, but a few, just enough, reach the ground and return. Compile those returns, and a different Amazon emerges. Not the Amazon of trees, but the Amazon of structure. The first time researchers processed LiDAR data from the rainforest, they froze. Because the forest floor didn't look natural. It looked designed. The hidden geometry. Across regions of Bolivia, Brazil, and Ecuador, the scans revealed shapes no forest produces on its own. Perfect squares, symmetrical circles, octagons, causeways that ran straight for miles, terraces carved into hillsides, rectangular platforms elevated above floodplains. These were not random gaps in the trees. They were engineered landscapes, earthworks built with purpose. Some complexes measured hundreds of meters across. Others were part of multi-site clusters arranged along axes that mirrored the stars. At least one site revealed a network of sunken roads radiating outward like spokes, a pattern strikingly similar to classical urban planning. The jungle was not hiding chaos. It was hiding order. Cities without stone. What makes these cities remarkable isn't just their scale, it's their subtlety. Unlike Rome, Angkor, or the Maya, the builders of the Amazon supercities didn't construct in stone. They built in compacted earth, clay, wooden palisades, bamboo, thatch, engineered soil. Materials the forest consumes quickly. So for centuries, nothing seemed to remain. From the ground, you saw only vegetation, a mound disguised as a hill, a plaza swallowed by palms, a road buried under roots. But from above, stripped of the canopy, the blueprint reappears. A network, not a kingdom. The LiDAR scans revealed something even more revolutionary. This was not a civilization built around one capital, not a single empire like Rome or the Aztecs. It was a network of interconnected cities and ceremonial hubs, a constellation of urban centers linked by raised causeways, canals, and navigable rivers. Distance meant nothing. Water was everywhere, and the people of the Amazon were masters of it. The civilization was not centralized. It was distributed, decentralized, resilient. In many ways, it resembled modern ideas of garden cities or eco-urbanism centuries before such concepts ever existed. The Kasarabe culture, a revelation. One of the most dramatic LiDAR revelations came from the Bolivian Amazon, the monumental cities of the Kasarabe culture. Before LiDAR, they were assumed to be small villages. After LiDAR, they were revealed as enormous platforms, some 20 meters tall, pyramidal structures of earth, engineered reservoirs, ringed roads, ceremonial causeways elevated above wetlands, sprawling settlement grids. Some complexes extended over 1,000 hectares, larger than many medieval European towns. These were not casual communities. They were urban organisms, adapted perfectly for the rainforest. A civilization that designed the forest. What the scans show is not just city planning. They show ecological planning. Many earthworks align with waterways. Many platforms are raised to avoid seasonal floods. Canals connect to fish weirs, suggesting engineered aquaculture. Even the forest composition around ancient sites is different. More fruit trees, more useful species, fewer random plants. The Amazon's biodiversity is not entirely wild. Much of it is curated. The people here didn't fight the rainforest. They edited it. Why the cities disappeared. LiDAR also provides clues to the civilization's disappearance. The timeline suggests that the urban peak occurred shortly before European arrival, but then silence. What happened? The most supported theory isn't war. It isn't climate collapse. It isn't rebellion. It's disease. Pathogens introduced through early contact could have reduced populations by 70 to 90% in a few generations. With fewer people maintaining the roads, fields, and canals, the rainforest surged back, as fast as fire, but in silence. Within a century, entire cities vanished beneath the canopy. What remained was not ruins, but forest. A city that breathes. One of the most haunting aspects of the LiDAR data is how alive the landscapes still appear. You can see defensive ditches now filled with water, causeways used by tapirs, reservoirs now thriving with birds, plazas now shaded by ancient cyber trees. The forest did not erase the cities, it absorbed them. The Amazon today is not untouched. It is a hybrid. Nature and civilization fused so completely that even experts struggle to separate the two, rewriting what we know about civilization. Every new LiDAR scan across the Amazon reveals the same truth. What we once saw as wilderness was actually a garden built by millions, maintained by knowledge, and engineered with sophistication that rivals old-world civilizations. The implications are vast. History's timeline is incomplete. Complexity does not require stone. Cities can be ecological. Collapse can be silent and invisible. The past is far more interconnected than we ever believed. And now the next question becomes unavoidable. Who were these people? What did they believe? How did they organize their world? And what stories did they pass down before silence took hold? To understand the civilization, we must explore its culture, the rituals, symbols, and social structures that held this rainforest world together. The people of the Amazon did not build power vertically. They built it horizontally, woven into rivers, forests, animals, and ancestors. Their world was not a kingdom, but a continuum where nature, spirit, and society blended into a single living system. A civilization of many, not one. Unlike the Egyptians, Romans, or Chinese, the Amazonian world was not organized around a single capital or emperor. It was a network, a constellation of interconnected towns, ceremonial sites, and engineered landscapes. LiDAR reveals that some of these cities were enormous, but none monopolized power. Cultural historians now believe this was intentional. In a rainforest, centralized authority is fragile. If one city falls, everything collapses. But a distributed system? It survives, it adapts, it breathes. This was not an empire in the traditional sense. It was a forest-wide alliance, linked by trade, ritual, kinship, and the rivers that tied everything together like arteries. The river as highway, memory, and spirit. In the Amazon, the river is not just water. It is the main road, the storyteller of generations, the calendar of the wet and dry seasons, and the home of spirits older than history. Boats carved from great trees connected villages across hundreds of miles. These were not crude canoes. They were engineered vessels designed to move silently through flooded forests, able to navigate tight channels that would defeat modern boats. Along the rivers stood clusters of settlements, each one specializing in something: fishing, ceramics, agriculture, ritual, craftsmanship, urban medicine. The river network created what archaeologists now call pier cities, autonomous but connected, like beads on a long necklace of green. Belief systems rooted in ecology. Religion was not separate from daily life. It was woven into the environment itself. The Amazonian worldview was built on three pillars. Animism. Everything has spirit. Trees, stones, rivers, storms. Reciprocity. You take from nature only what you give back. Continuity. Ancestors remain present as part of the land. Instead of towering stone pyramids, ceremonial centers were often circular earthworks, designed to represent cycles: rain, fertility, seasons, rebirth. Some circles align with solstices, others with star clusters like the Pleiades. Astronomy mattered deeply, not for empire building, but for agriculture and ritual timing. The entire civilization resembled a cosmology brought to life, a living calendar carved across the rainforest floor. A social system built on cooperation, not conquest. The Amazon's environment does not reward hoarding or accumulation. Food spoils quickly. Material wealth is limited. Survival depends on harmony, not domination. So their social structure evolved accordingly. Instead of inequality-based hierarchies, many Amazonian societies operated on principles of collective leadership, where authority was fluid and tied to knowledge, age, spiritual connection, ecological stewardship. Leadership wasn't inherited. It was earned through mastery of medicine, farming, fishing, or ritual. Imagine a world where the greatest leaders were not conquerors, but mediators between humans and nature. The role of ritual and ceremony. Ceremony sat at the center of Amazonian identity. Feasts, dances, and gatherings reinforced alliances between cities. Some rituals lasted days, guided by rhythmic drumming that echoed through the forest canopy. Others involved complex body painting, spirals representing rivers, dots representing stars, lines representing marriage between clans. At night, cities transformed into luminous spectacles, torches reflecting off earth pyramids, fires glowing in plazas, music carrying across the water. These gatherings weren't just religious events. They were political summits, trade fairs, and cultural festivals all at once. In this sense, the Amazon super-civilization wasn't just connected by roads and canals, it was connected by identity. Knowledge systems centuries ahead of their time. Their knowledge of the natural world was astonishing. They domesticated plants long before Europeans arrived. They used sophisticated fish farming systems with engineered wetlands. They created medicines from thousands of plant species. They designed orchards disguised as wild forest. They practiced complex agroforestry, growing dozens of crops: cassava, tucumã, acai, guava, cacao, and more, in multi-layered gardens that mirrored natural ecosystems. One of their greatest inventions, terra preta, was not a single technology, but a cultural tradition passed through generations. Their worldview didn't separate science from spirituality. Knowledge was sacred. Healing plants were gifts from the ancestors. Fishing weirs were designed based on animal behavior observed for centuries. Star movements dictated farm cycles. Every practice was part of a larger ecological philosophy. The human face of the Amazon supercity. So, who were these people, really? DNA, pottery styles, and settlement patterns suggest a vast diversity, hundreds of cultures connected through marriage networks, trade alliances, shared rituals, regional councils, river confederations. Some communities developed monumental urban architecture. Others served as spiritual centers. Others were agricultural specialists maintaining orchards and terra preta fields. In this sense, the Amazonian civilization wasn't one culture with one name. It was a family of societies, a mosaic of languages and traditions tied together by ecology rather than empire. Their identity wasn't written on stone monuments. It was written in forests, soils, rivers, myths, and the very shape of the land beneath our feet. A civilization that chose wisdom over power. Perhaps the most striking aspect of Amazon culture is what they didn't do. They didn't build empires. They didn't expand through conquest. They didn't worship kings. Their power came from balance, a philosophical system that allowed millions to coexist with one of the harshest ecosystems on Earth. Their legacy wasn't military. It was ecological, spiritual, and scientific. They were not a civilization lost. They were a civilization hidden, by time, by forest, by our assumptions. To see the Amazon as they did, we must understand their cities, how they were built, how they functioned, and how they sustained millions before vanishing into green silence. Civilizations usually leave behind echoes, broken temples, stone roads, shattered walls, inscriptions carved in languages long forgotten. But the Amazon's great civilization left behind something far stranger. No collapsed pyramids, no burned palaces, no fields of bones, just trees. Endless, green, beautiful trees. To understand how a society that mastered ecology, engineered soil, and built thousands of interconnected settlements could simply vanish, we must explore a truth more unsettling than conquest or war. Sometimes civilizations don't fall, they dissolve. When the Old World arrived, the New World changed forever. The first Europeans who entered the Amazon in the 1500s encountered towns filled with tens of thousands of people. They walked along straight, leveled roads wider than any in Spain. They traded in bustling markets. They witnessed elaborate rituals and vast agricultural fields. But these accounts were dismissed as fantasy, because just decades later, every one of those cities was gone. What happened in those short, catastrophic years is one of the greatest demographic collapses in human history. Diseases like smallpox, measles, and influenza tore across the Amazon faster than any invading army. Indigenous populations had no immunity. The pathogens spread through river networks, trade routes, marriage alliances, and shared ceremonies. Some villages disappeared in a single generation. Others lost half their population in mere weeks. The scholars who study this period call it the Silent Wave, a wave of death that no one saw because it traveled not with swords, but with breath. A civilization built for balance, not war. Unlike societies that centered power in one capital, the Amazon's distributed network, thousands of interconnected towns, was resilient against invasions but fragile against population collapse. Their strength was mutual connection. Their weakness was the same. When illness struck, the very pathways that sustained the civilization, rivers, canals, causeways, became conduits for contagion. In cities of 10,000, only dozens might survive. Entire knowledge systems, passed orally from master to apprentice, were interrupted. Specialists in terra preta creation, fish farming engineers, and ritual leaders vanished before they could pass down their lessons. A civilization built on harmony had no defense against a microscopic enemy it could neither fight nor comprehend. The forest takes back what was once its own. When population collapses elsewhere in history, stone remains. Cities linger as bones of empire. But in the rainforest, nothing built from wood lasts long. Rain, fungi, insects, vines, nature reclaims everything quickly. A road left untended becomes a trench, then a garden, then forest floor. A house becomes a mound. A ceremonial plaza becomes a pond. A canal becomes a swamp alive with fish and birds. And because the Amazon grows fast, unimaginably fast, within a single human lifetime, an entire city can vanish as though it never existed. The myth of the primitive jungle begins. By the time later explorers returned, the forest had healed over everything. They saw only small, isolated communities, remnants of once massive populations. Without the knowledge of what had come before, Europeans assumed this was how it had always been. Small tribes, scattered villages, subsistence living, no cities, no engineering, no complexity. An entire civilization had disappeared so cleanly that even its memory was lost. For centuries, the West believed what it saw, that the Amazon was a land untouched by humans. This assumption became a scientific myth, one that persisted until LIDAR shattered it. Did they truly disappear, or did they change shape? But the full story is not simply one of collapse. Many anthropologists now believe the Amazonian civilization didn't just die, it transformed. Fragments of their knowledge survive in modern indigenous cultures. How to farm fish using engineered ponds, how to create biochar, how to cultivate orchards within forests, how to maintain biodiversity with precision. Their social values, emphasis on reciprocity, cooperation, and humility toward nature, are echoes of an ancient worldview. Even their trade networks may have survived in reduced forms. Some tribes retain myths of the Great Roads and the Cities of the Sky, stories that describe monumental architecture swallowed by the jungle. What we call collapse may, in reality, be adaptation, a civilization retreating into mobility, self-preservation, and smaller social units after catastrophe. The civilization that hides on purpose. There is a haunting possibility explored by some researchers. What if this civilization didn't just fade? What if it chose obscurity? After disease decimated populations, surviving groups may have avoided rebuilding large towns. Concentrated populations meant vulnerability. The forest offered protection. Secrecy became survival. Over generations, they could have encoded this new philosophy into their culture. Don't build large cities. Don't gather in huge numbers. Don't leave monumental traces. Live lightly. Let the forest shield you. If this is true, then the rainforest itself is not simply a grave. It is camouflage. A living veil protecting a civilization's descendants from a world that once nearly destroyed them. The forest as archivist, not executioner. The Amazon did not kill the ancient cities. It preserved them. Softly, slowly, carefully. The forest is not an enemy of civilization. It is a library, one written in soil, in plant composition, in geometric mounds, in river shapes, in cultural patterns still alive today. Behind every tree lies a story. Beneath every root lies design. Every garden that appears wild may once have been a farm. Every straight line under LiDAR may once have been a road. Every patch of dark soil, a thriving urban district. A civilization that challenges everything we think we know. The Amazon's lost cities force us to confront uncomfortable questions. How many civilizations vanished without stone? How many histories were erased by ecosystems that heal quickly? How many human achievements lie hidden beneath jungles across the world? Is progress always linear? Or can complexity exist quietly, invisibly, without pyramids or armies? The truth is simple and staggering. The Amazon was never empty. The forest was never untouched. This was memory. Memory of people who built a world that lived with nature, not against it. A world that thrived for millennia before silence swept over it. Next, we ask the final question. What does this forgotten civilization mean for us today? What lessons does it leave for a planet facing ecological crisis, overpopulation, and the limits of growth? When a civilization disappears, the world often forgets it. But sometimes, in rare and powerful cases, what disappears leaves behind something more important than monuments or kings: a lesson. A blueprint for how humans can exist not as dominators of nature, but as part of its intelligence. The Amazon's hidden civilization is one such teacher. Their roads have vanished. Their plazas are swallowed by trees. Their languages linger only in fragments. But their legacy remains alive in the forest, in the soil, in biodiversity, in the shape of the land, in indigenous knowledge, and in the very logic of how ecosystems can thrive alongside human presence. To understand the power of their legacy, we must look at the world they built and the world we are building today. A civilization that engineered abundance instead of scarcity. The first and most profound legacy of the Amazon's ancient people is their approach to resources. They understood something that modern societies often fail to grasp. The rainforest is not something to conquer, it is something to collaborate with. Instead of leveling forests, they worked with ecological cycles. They engineered terra preta, soil that regenerates. They cultivated orchards disguised as wild forest. They created fish traps that replenished themselves. They farmed in multi-layered systems that mimicked natural ecology. They built cities that didn't scar the land, they blended into it. Modern agricultural systems often exhaust the land until nothing grows. The Amazonian strategy did the opposite. The longer the system ran, the stronger it became. This alone challenges our entire model of civilization. Decentralization as strength, not weakness. Most great civilizations depended on centralization, capitals, palaces, emperors, armies. But the Amazonian world thrived using a different model, a distributed urban network where power was shared, cities were specialized, failure in one area didn't collapse the rest. Roads and rivers linked people more than rulers did. This distributed architecture is eerily similar to how modern societies now design. The internet, renewable energy grids, decentralized supply networks, resilient communities. They understood the mathematics of resilience long before we did. Where other civilizations fell like trees, theirs vanished like mist, quietly but never violently. Ecology as philosophy. Another legacy lies in their worldview. Amazonian cosmology didn't divide the world into human and nature. Instead, it saw life as a braided rope of relationships. Humans, animals, rivers, weather, ancestors, celestial bodies, plants. Each affecting the other, each responsible for harmony. In their worldview, taking without giving was not just unethical, it was cosmically dangerous. Imperial expansion. Massive hierarchies, extractive industries, ecological collapse. In a world now facing climate change and mass extinction, their philosophy feels less like ancient belief and more like prophecy. The forest as a living archive. Modern archaeologists now believe that up to 20% of the Amazon rainforest may have been shaped by human hands, not destroyed or replaced, but designed. Fruit tree clusters, fertile islands of terra preta, geometrically arranged wetlands, biodiversity hotspots aligned with ancient settlements. The forest today is not wild, it is memory, alive and breathing. This means that conservation is not about freezing nature in time. It's about understanding the partnership between people and environment, a partnership the Amazonian civilization perfected. The Great Warning: collapse can be invisible. The Amazon's ancient world didn't collapse with fire or invasion. No armies razed their cities. No warlords toppled their leaders. Instead, they suffered something that modern societies fear deeply: collapse through vulnerability. In their case, disease, introduced by outsiders, spread faster than any warning could travel. In our case today, the threats are different: pandemics, climate change, soil depletion, water scarcity, deforestation. But the mechanism is the same. Systems collapse when resilience weakens. Their story warns us that even a civilization built on harmony can fall if it lacks protection against external forces. A message hidden in the canopy. One of the most powerful lessons from the Amazon supercivilization is this: civilization does not require domination, it requires design. They designed soils that feed generations, cities that breathe, economies that don't overreach, rituals that maintain social cohesion, ecological systems that improve over centuries, networks that outlast leaders. And yet, despite all their sophistication, they left almost nothing that screams their existence. That silence is the most haunting legacy of all, because it forces us to confront a possibility. The greatest civilizations might not be the ones that conquer landscapes. They might be the ones that disappear into them. Why their story matters today. We live in a world obsessed with monumentality, skyscrapers, megacities, global networks of trade. But the Amazonian past whispers a counterpoint. Cities can be green, not gray. Agriculture can heal, not exhaust. Urban networks can be decentralized, not centralized. Ecosystems can be partners, not obstacles. Collapse can be avoided by designing systems that regenerate, not degrade. Their forgotten world feels less like a relic of the distant past and more like a template for our future. In an age where humanity faces ecological limits, the Amazon's ancestors may have already solved problems we are only now beginning to understand. Their silence is not absence, it is instruction, it is invitation. The question that echoes across time. So what is the legacy of the Amazon's lost civilization? It is a challenge, a dare, a whisper through the leaves. What if the future of human civilization lies not in conquering nature, but in understanding how the forest once thrived with us? Their world wasn't perfect, no civilization is, but it offers a different path, one that blends intelligence with humility, innovation with restraint, city with forest, human with nature. The Amazon's hidden cities are not just a discovery of the past, they are a map of possibilities. A reminder that beneath every forest floor, beneath every assumption about history, there may lie an entire world, waiting to be rediscovered. The Amazon is often described as a place of untamed nature, a vast, wild cathedral built by rain and time. But now we know the truth is deeper, stranger, and far more beautiful. Beneath its canopy rest the echoes of a civilization that mastered the art of living with the world instead of trying to conquer it. A people who shaped rivers, soils, forests, and ecosystems not through force but through understanding. Their legacy isn't written in stone. It isn't carved into monuments. It isn't preserved in epic tales or imperial records. Their legacy grows. It breathes. It moves with the wind. It stands tall in every tree and hides in every dark patch of earth. And maybe, just maybe, that is why their story matters now more than ever. Because as our modern world pushes its own limits, soil exhausted, species vanishing, climates shifting, the memory of the Amazon's lost civilization offers a path we rarely consider. A civilization can be powerful without being destructive, advanced without being extractive, enduring without being overwhelming. They built cities that became forests. We build cities that defy them. They treated the earth as a partner. We treat it as a resource. So the question isn't just, what happened to them? It's, what can we learn from them? And what would our world look like if we chose balance instead of dominance? Design instead of consumption? Wisdom instead of conquest? The Amazon still whispers these questions in every rustling leaf, in every winding river, in every shadow of a buried road revealed by LiDAR's light. We just have to listen. Because here, at Temporal Rift Tales, we don't ask what happened. We ask, what if?